Tonight, Kathy Lee Gifford hosts an inspirational hour for the entire family, Miracle Babies. The chances of Shannon and Megan Fanning being born alive and surviving were 1,000,000 to 1.
I'd lay in bed wondering if that was the last kick I was ever going to feel.
The miraculous story of conjoined twins separated at birth. 4-month-old Ira Hubbard, his mom, dad, and sister were being pounded by 30-foot waves.
The breaking waves were covering the infant.
This man put his life on the line to save theirs. Cliff and Martha Tate were devastated when doctors told them their little boy was autistic and would never be normal.
He would just lay down on the kitchen floor and pound his head.
The story of an extraordinary mother whose unwavering passion allowed her to regain her son. At 51, Vivian McDonnell is the oldest American woman to give birth to triplets. The touching story of how a daughter's love and medical technology put her in the record books.
Ah, precious.
And we take you to New Orleans to witness a medical marvel. Twins born an unbelievable 95 days apart. These stories tonight on Miracle Babies. And now, your host, Kathy Lee Gifford.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Our program is a celebration of life. Each year in our country, almost 4 million babies are born. Some big, some small, and all precious. And each one, a miracle. Tonight, you'll meet just a few of them, and we'll show you how medical science, selfless acts of heroism, and perseverance have made their lives even more miraculous. We begin tonight with home video of the first birthday party for Shannon and Megan Fanning of Naperville, Illinois. For their parents, this day was more than a milestone. It was a miracle, because the chances of Shannon and Megan being born alive and surviving were 1,000,000 to 1. Although Sandy and Larry Fanning each had children from previous marriages, they were excited at the prospect of having a child of their own. On September 30th, 1993, when they went for a checkup, they were beyond excited. Tests not only confirmed that Sandy was pregnant, but there were 2 heartbeats.
And we both kind of shouted out that it was twins. The gal who did the ultrasound didn't have the same expression of joy on her face that Larry and I did.
Wow, they are so tiny.
But they couldn't know that the twins were in the same embryonic sac, an extremely rare and dangerous situation.
Those twins in themselves have a lot of complications, such as one dying, the cords getting wrapped around each other. You have an increased risk of preterm labor with any twins. If one twin dies, the other twin can die because of the dead fetus in there. So as much as there was a lot of joy with the pregnancy, there was a lot of fear involved in it.
Another growing concern was the possibility that the twins could be conjoined, physically connected to each other. Sandy would now be treated by a team of specialists.
They were really so close you could barely slip a piece of paper between them. He saw what he thought was fairly conclusive evidence, I guess, that the babies were in trouble already. It looked like fetal stress, and we said, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, when you come back in a week or 2 weeks, one of the babies will be dead and the other one's going to be dying.
We didn't sleep for, I would say, the majority of the 2 weeks, because I'd lay in bed just waiting to feel the next kick and wondering if that was the last kick I was ever going to feel. And that was probably the first time I'd ever seen Larry cry. And that was hard. That was real hard.
For an agonizing 2 weeks, they waited to see if one or both of their babies were alive.
The suspense was, just tremendous, because we wanted to see what, are there still those 2 beacons of light? And that I could tell from Larry's face immediately that there were heartbeats, because, his face just changed. I knew they were fine.
Here we see 2 hearts beating.
Confirmation. Both babies were alive. They had overcome the first hurdle in a long marathon.
Even if they are born alive, they will still have to go through separation surgery. And depending on what vital organs are shared, a lot of times survival is not possible for one or both babies.
At 15 weeks, doctors determined the babies were joined at the abdomen. They shared a single liver, and they were girls. Their parents named them Shannon and Megan.
We documented everything we could. We kept ultrasound pictures. I kept a journal. We wanted to have everything we could, if in fact we'd only have a memory.
Their lungs wouldn't be sufficiently developed until the 34th week. The more the babies developed, the better their chances for survival and ultimately separation. When contractions started at 29 weeks, 11 weeks early, doctors immediately admitted Sandy to the hospital, administering medication to stop the contractions. Dr. Larry Moss was one of 4 pediatric surgeons who would separate the girls. The biggest concern was not dividing the liver, but a tiny duct attached to it, the width of a sewing needle.
For a liver to survive, it has to have a biliary system or bile duct with intact drainage. If there was only one biliary system, then only one baby could survive.
March 24th, week 33. After 4.5 weeks in the hospital, Sandy's contractions started again.
That day was probably the most incredibly emotional for me because I knew I had them inside me. I knew they were alive, and I knew they were safe and warm. And I knew that they had a terrible fight in front of them. And it was real hard.
At 11:54 a.m., Shannon and Megan Fanning were born. Together they weighed 7 pounds, 12 ounces.
It was just incredible, that first sound. And it wasn't just one, it was a duet. And that was beautiful. You knew there was life. You knew they were little fighters from the day one. It was great.
They were just the cutest, tiny babies you've ever seen. They did not look premature. They looked healthy. They just happened to be joined.
But now, after 33 weeks living as one, and just 2 hours into their new lives, Shannon and Megan were separated from their mother, as doctors prepared to separate them from each other.
I prayed for him. Told him how much I loved him. Kissed him probably about 1 million times. They had to fight me to get him back. I did not want to give him back. And we took a few more family shots with Larry and the babies and I. We had to say goodbye.
Larry stayed with the babies as they were rushed to another hospital that specialized in pediatric surgery. Doctors assessed the baby's condition, which would dictate when they would operate.
They both appeared to have bowel obstructions. And the significance of that is that they would need to be operated on within 24 hours. Bowel obstruction is life-threatening.
Surgery was scheduled for 9 a.m.
Our whole marriage, we'd always made decisions together. This was going to be the hardest thing that we had done because Larry was in one hospital with Megan and Shannon, and I was 30, 40 miles away, and without all of them. And I never even thought that would happen.
I'm gonna go down with you, girls. I'll follow you as far as I can.
Obviously, we didn't know going into the separation surgery if we'd have both of them afterwards.
For the surgeons, the science and technology existed to separate the babies, but what they would find inside would determine who lived and who died. The only way both babies would survive was if there were 2 bile ducts. Finally, X-rays revealed each had their own bile duct, but their lives were still in jeopardy. There were several threats, including bowel obstructions and the actual liver separation. After 9 hours in surgery, miraculously, they were still alive.
For the first 48 hours, they were critically ill.
When I walked into the nursery and I saw Megan and Shannon for the first time, it was an incredible feeling. I was so happy inside to see that they were two, but it was so sad to see what we had put them through.
That 48 hours turned into days, then weeks, then finally, they could breathe on their own.
First time I held Megan and Shannon together, but separate, one in each arms, it was the most incredible feeling. I looked down and I'd see each one settled in, and even when they were crying, it was fantastic. It was like that's exactly where they belonged, and they were finally there.
Actually, this is 6 months from the day that Megan left Shannon.
We like to look at it as a double miracle. Not only were we given life, but we were given 2 lives, and we beat the odds.
To give you some perspective on just how remarkable the Fanning story is, consider this. Over the past 300 years, there have been less than 50 reported cases where conjoined twins were successfully separated, and both babies survived. We'll be right back.
4-month-old Ira Hubbard, his mom, dad, and sister were being pounded by 30-foot waves.
The breaking waves were covering the infant.
This man put his life on the line to save theirs, next on Miracle Babies.
Webster's dictionary defines a hero as someone who risks or sacrifices his or her life. When little Ira Hubbard grows up, he'll have a lot more than just a definition. He'll have a real-life video of a group of heroes who put their lives on the line to save his.
Reset. Okay, console. Check.
November 17th, 1994, 9:30 a.m. The Coast Guard station in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, received a frantic mayday call. A family on a boat at sea was in critical danger, and to make the situation even worse, there was a tiny baby on board. 3 days before, Ira Hubbard, his wife Flor, a native of Colombia, South America, 13-year-old daughter Laura, and 4-month-old son Ira Jr. had boarded their new sailboat, the Marine Flower II, on the first leg of a dream trip around the world. But their dream became a nightmare when suddenly Hurricane Gordon, which had been gusting off the coast of Florida, switched course and was now pounding their boat with violent 50-mile-an-hour winds and punishing 30-foot waves.
The storm was a surprise. It was not going according to what was predicted for me by the weather service.
And what if you can't get him? And how hard is it going to be to get the baby out of the water?
It felt like they wouldn't get there. And when they got there, I would already be dead or dying from nervousness or a heart attack.
While the rescue helicopter rushed to the scene, a Coast Guard C-130 escort plane flew to meet them. Its job, to transmit instructions to the Hubbards and act as a communication relay for the rescue helicopter. Video cameras mounted on both the plane and the helicopter captured the life or death drama that was about to unfold.
When we got on scene, I looked down at that boat and I go, I cannot believe there's a 4-month-old baby on that boat. And then, of course, how are we going to get that 4-month-old baby off the boat, into the water, and up in the helicopter?
The rescue team had only enough fuel to hover above the sailboat for 34 minutes. The boat was rocking uncontrollably.
I want to climb a little in altitude. Those masts came close that time.
If the mast hit the helicopter, it would knock it out of the sky. To reach the family, rescue swimmer Mario Vittoni would literally have to put his life on the line as he was lowered down 35 feet into the turbulent water on a 3/8-inch steel cable.
Okay, swimmer has his raft. Okay, he's going to climb on board the back. If he can, yeah, to get the baby in his hands. It's a lot safer.
The original plan was to go down to the water and use the life raft as like a staging platform for the baby. So if for some reason we had to let go or I couldn't hang on, the baby'd still be floating and we'd have a way to get to him.
Suddenly, a wave wrenched the life raft from Mario's grasp.
Bad swell. Oh, man, we probably hurt his back. He's in the water again. How's they going to keep that baby alive in the water like that? I don't know.
With the life raft gone and time and fuel running out, the team scrambled to form a backup plan.
The stern of the boat and the bow of the boat would leave as much as 12 feet, cresting over the top of a wave and then slamming back down in, which made it impossible to get on the boat and pull people off that way.
Probably better just have him jump off. Yeah, I would think jump off.
I didn't have any alternative. I knew if I stayed on the boat, we would die.
But as Flor was holding baby Ira, trying to get up enough nerve to jump, the rescue crew decided the jump was too dangerous.
Swimmer's away. Tell him no. Can you tell him no?
Finally, the sea made the decision. Flor and her baby were swept off by a 30-foot wave.
He's in the water. It's too late. He's in the water. Okay, Laura's got basket down. Okay, basket is going down.
That basket would be their lifeline to safety.
He's right there. He's 5 feet from him. Come on, Mario, swim. Swim, Mario! Mario has the baby.
I grabbed the mother by the back of her life jacket and grabbed little Ira by the front of his and was trying to separate them and push him up out of the water, get the baby up out of the water and the mother up out of the water. The mother was terrified.
I felt afraid because I didn't understand what Mario was saying to me about the baby. And the baby was swallowing water, and I was trying to put him in the rescue basket.
She was grabbing on to my back, and her other arm was grabbing on the arm that was holding Ira. And at that point, the breaking waves were covering the infant. So at the end, it just had to be a jerk and got the baby up out of the water. And I remember being very relieved to have it completely out of the water. But it still didn't help because then I just looked up and saw the waves behind it, and it just was not a place for the baby to be.
Woman and baby are clear water. Clear move back and left. Clear move back and left. Thank God. Clear move back and left. Don't worry about it, Bob. Dan, you look back down. I'm not bringing them in back first. I want to bring them in face first because that's the way I can get it around the tank. Okay, I'm bringing them up. I'm bringing them in. Hey, basket's in the cabin.
The mother was kind of in shock, looking around like, oh my gosh, what happened? And my first thought was, oh my gosh, the baby didn't survive coming up. And I looked back at the baby one more time, just kind of stared at it for a couple seconds, and he opened his eyes, looked at me, and smiled. I'm like, oh my gosh, this baby just went through all this, and he's smiling.
Taking a load.
Now with Flor and Ira Jr. safely on board the helicopter, the rescue team signaled to Mario that they had less than 2 minutes of fuel remaining to complete their mission. Physically exhausted, Mario still had to pull Ira's dad, sister Laura, and himself to safety. If he couldn't, the helicopter would be forced to return without them.
Okay, he looks tired, cold, and he looks like he's in pain. Give me a second, and I'll close the door and we start securing. Okay. Let's see on 30 now. It's success, right? Yeah. Okay.
1 year after their incredible rescue, we flew the Hubbard family back to Elizabeth City, North Carolina, to reunite them with the real-life heroes that had saved their lives.
Hi, how are you? Good. Nice to see you guys. Hi, how are you? Nice to see you.
We were so very far away, and without them we never would have survived. And I give them all my thanks.
I'm not sure what it is that about children, other than they haven't had the chance to realize how important their life is yet. And that struck me. It struck me hard. And he was going to get that chance.
Thank you.
The Coast Guard has been saving lives for over 200 years. Little Ira Hubbard is the youngest.
Still ahead, Vivian McDonald is the oldest American woman to give birth to triplets. The touching story of how a daughter's love and medical technology put her in the record books.
On March 4th, 1996, when Vivian McDonald of Bel Air, Maryland gave birth, she earned a place in the record books as the oldest mother of triplets in the United States. Vivian is 51 years old. But the story of Vivian, her husband Sean, and the McDonald triplets is much more than a statistic or even a medical marvel. This is their inspirational story.
That's it. That's it. Daddy's here. Yeah. Okay. If I never believed in miracles before, I do now. Of course, with the help of medical science, but still, what it's given me is 3 lives. That is a miracle. They are, all 3 of them.
When Sean married Vivian in 1993, she was 48, had 2 grown children from a previous marriage, a grandchild, and a successful career. Vivian wanted to start a second family with Sean, but it seemed out of the question, especially after the death of her son Ricky, who was only 24 years old.
I lost my oldest son through a motorcycle accident. I had to go through that. This shocked my entire system to where I started going into menopause.
I had accepted the fact that it would just be us, and we would just live happily ever after. It just seemed that I wasn't destined to be a father.
But destiny threw a curveball 2 years ago, when Vivian and her daughter Piper were watching a TV movie about a woman named Arlette Schweitzer. Arlette had been implanted with her daughter's eggs and had gone on to carry the twins to term.
You know, what you're proposing, mother is surrogate for daughter, has never been done before, at least not in this country.
Somebody's got to be the first. That started me to think, if she could do that, maybe I could do that through a donor egg.
Vivian was filled with questions, but she was too afraid to search for answers. She would call doctors' offices, but then hang up because she was too embarrassed to ask. Finally, she called a nursing hotline where she could be anonymous.
I said, you know, I just need to ask the question, can a woman that's postmenopausal, through donor egg, actually carry and give birth to a child? And she said yes.
Vivian was referred to Dr. Marvin Swanson at the fertility clinic at Union Memorial Hospital in nearby Baltimore.
For in vitro fertilization, there are very few pregnancies over the age of 43. And when Mrs. McDonald consulted me, she was already 49. And so this was beyond the standard in vitro fertilization age for that she had any chance of getting pregnant with her own eggs.
But if Vivian could find an egg donor, she could become pregnant. Vivian knew immediately there was only one donor she would feel comfortable with.
The only donor that could be considered would be my daughter, Piper.
Piper, who is 31, is Vivian's only daughter. She lives in Oklahoma with her husband and daughters. She talks to her mom on the phone nearly every day, but one call was very different.
I brought up the movie again. I said, we kind of kidded about this, But I said, now this is really serious. And I said, I don't want an answer tonight. I want you to run this by Bill, that's her husband, and I want 100% from both parties.
I felt that it would be the neatest thing I could do for her and give her. You know, your mother gives you so much in a lifetime that it was neat that I could give something back.
The family made their decision out of love, but there were serious ethical issues to confront, especially the relationship between Piper and the baby that her mother would carry.
We had a long talk about this. She did not feel any maternal instincts at all towards her eggs. She has no attachment to her eggs at all, and gave them freely without being pressured.
If people are going to look at this like you gave your child away, who more would I want to give it to than my mother?
In the summer of 1995, Vivian began taking medication that would trick her uterus into preparing for pregnancy. If the medication worked, she would be able to bear children. Again, in October, 4 eggs were taken from Piper. Then, in the laboratory, fertilized with Sean's sperm. 4 embryos developed. To improve the chances of conception, all 4 were implanted into Vivian's uterus. 2 weeks later, Vivian was told she was pregnant on the very first attempt, an extremely rare event at any age.
Boy, I mean, that was the most exciting moment. I just was screaming. I was so happy. I wanted to just do everything all at once. I wanted to cry. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run outside and tell everybody that I had done it. I did it. I did this. It was almost like, at that moment, it was as if I had done it all by myself, you know?
It became very real. The first day, we went into Dr. Swanson's office, and he did the first test. And all I saw was 3 black holes on a screen. He said, these are sacs developing. I said, okay. I said, what does that mean? He says, there's 3 babies in there.
And here comes your mother. There's your mommy. There you are, right there. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit on the,
Vivian had a remarkably uncomplicated pregnancy. In fact, the only problem seemed to be Dad's ability to focus his brand new video camera.
Harper, you're up top. See, you're up top. Now, down there, Cole and Sean's over there. There you are. You're all there, guys.
This is Vivian in her 5th month. But by her 7th month, Vivian was in pain. The weight of those 3 bodies growing inside her had become unbearable. The McDonalds were told it was time.
Have anything you want to say?
There were more than a dozen medical specialists waiting for Vivian and Sean in the delivery room. Then, by cesarean section, on March 4th, 1996, at 3:14 p.m.
After that, I walked out into the hallway and I said, my God, I'm a father. You know, the miracle has happened.
Baby girl Harper, baby boy Cole, and baby boy Sean were instantly propelled into the headlines. First, there was a hospital press conference.
Wow.
Then, leaving the hospital, the McDonalds ran the media gauntlet. But we were there to share the family's first moments together at home.
Welcome home.
But quiet time was short-lived for this instant family of 5. Before Sean could even change out of his suit and tie, this dad was on duty, ready and willing for the job of his lifetime.
I've made a commitment, a real commitment for as long as I can to be their friend. And I don't know what I ever did without them.
And as soon as the media hoopla began to die down, Piper arrived for a very poignant homecoming.
Oh, precious. He's snoozing.
See what teamwork does?
It's just an unbelievable feeling. It's just, I can't express it. I call it sweet sad. And it's such a sweet feeling that I have. But it's such a tender moment that it makes you emotional.
And the way I feel is I lost a brother, and I thought it was kind of neat that I've got 2 more brothers.
I hope she sees us that she's brought life full circle. Her mother gave to her, and now this is what she's given back to her mother. This is really the gift of life. And they're miracles. The miracles on 33rd Street. Right? They'll understand that one day.
Next, doctors told Cliff and Martha Tate their little boy was autistic and would never be normal.
He would just lay down on the kitchen floor and pound his head.
The story of an extraordinary mother whose passion allowed her to regain her son.
Welcome back. If you're a parent, this next story hits very close to home. Imagine for a moment never being able to communicate with your child. That's the situation Martha and Cliff Tate of Winter Park, Florida faced with their son Bronson. But the Tates regained their son because of the passion of an extraordinary mother.
Hey, buddy. Hey, Bronson.
Sometimes he was totally out of this world.
Bronson.
Trying to get your child's attention, it's something every parent can identify with. But for Bronson Tate, it wasn't a simple matter of selective hearing.
He was extremely frustrated and just violent. And sometimes he would just lay down on the kitchen floor and pound his head. And it's tile floors.
He screamed a lot, and we had to wear earplugs a lot because we didn't want to get screamed right in the ear.
Doctors dismissed Bronson's behavior as temper tantrums. For Cliff, the answer was even simpler: a lack of discipline.
I can remember one time Bronson was pitching his usual fit. I was thinking, gosh, am I just going to have to, take a week off from work and stay at home and work with him and try to, teach him to be good? I guess feeling like Martha, she wasn't doing a good enough job as a mom to be able to fix this problem.
I felt like that Cliff didn't really understand what Bronson's problem was, but I lived with him. I mean, I cared for him night and day, and I knew that it wasn't just that he wasn't listening or he wasn't choosing to listen. It was that he didn't know what was going on.
Who was that? Who's that? It's just, it wasn't a son at that point. It's just, there, you could give to him, but there was nothing coming back at all.
Cliff didn't feel like he had a son. Ashton didn't feel like he had a brother, but I still had a son. Even if I didn't feel that love coming back from him, I knew it was in there somewhere. We just had to get it. We just had to find it and pull it out.
It took 2.5 years before Bronson was diagnosed as being autistic.
It's kind of like getting hit in the stomach. I didn't know anything about autism. Then people would say, well, that in the movie Rain Man, that he was autistic. You have people telling you need to really consider putting him in an institution. So that was, just real scary.
Autism is a largely misdiagnosed brain disorder, characterized by problems with speech, reasoning, and social interaction, such as showing affection. It often goes undiagnosed until the preschool years. But for Martha, the diagnosis was not an end. It was a beginning.
And so I searched and I read. I made more phone calls to the Autism Society, to any place that I could think of that would offer information on this. I started getting a little bit discouraged at that point because everything I could find said there is no cure.
Finally, a glimmer of hope. Martha found a book, What to Do About Your Brain-Injured Child, written by Glenn Doman. Doman was the founder of the Institutes for the Achievement of Human Potential in Philadelphia. The Tates had no idea that it would change their lives forever.
They believed that the younger you can discover a child's brain injury, the quicker you can get treatment while they're young, the better their chances are.
The Institute has a controversial but internationally recognized program for brain-injured children. Founded in 1955, they've treated over 20,000 kids.
The Institute doesn't graduate every kid. They graduate a child who has progressed to the point where they are totally well. And so in my mind, I didn't know how long it was going to take, but I wasn't going to quit if I felt like there was a hope of us graduating.
Oh, you're such a big boy.
What we do is we teach parents how to fix their brain-injured kid's brain. It's very straightforward, but it's very hard work, very hard work. And we want to make absolutely sure that every parent understands that, so that the ones who are not prepared to do it simply don't come.
The Institute's program is a combination of intense physical therapy, exhaustive breathing exercises, and constant sensory stimulation. The Tates went to Philadelphia to learn the curriculum. For Bronson to have any chance, Martha would have to maintain an overwhelming schedule. 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, for as long as it would take. Cliff's work as an engineer made it impossible for him to be there full-time, so Martha needed help. She found 30 volunteers, family, friends, and neighbors. Effectively, they would attempt to rewire Bronson's brain by forcing him to go through the early stages of development a normal child goes through.
Jackal. Koala.
The first stage was patterning, a procedure designed to develop his midbrain. 9 times a day, 3 people at a time would lie Bronson on a table, often against his will, moving his head, arms, and legs. Next, they had to motivate 3-year-old Bronson to learn how to crawl on his belly like a 7-month-old child. Martha needed an area with no distractions, which her church offered, but only at 5:45 in the morning and 7 at night. The next step in Bronson's evolution, creeping up on his hands and knees. Martha and big brother Ashton crept with him. Patterning, creeping, and crawling were just part of the program. It was critical that Martha teach Bronson to breathe properly. In other words, feed more oxygen to his brain, providing the best environment in which his brain could function. This is called masking, a procedure she did every 5 minutes, 45 seconds each time. Martha did this 70 times a day.
They literally had no privacy. There were days that you could tell the look on their face. It just was not a fun day. Bronson might have been having a temper tantrum or something, but they still would stay in there and work the patterns every day.
I don't think there's many moms that could have kept up the schedule that she kept up, to care for their kids and for me that much, willing to make the extreme sacrifices that she did.
But the grueling schedule took its toll, and it was 5-year-old Ashton who would rekindle her spirit.
We were going to the school to go creep, and I stopped at the stop sign, and I just started crying. I was just emotionally and physically exhausted, and I just didn't think I could do it. And Ashton knew that I wasn't turning the way to go to church, and he said, you know, we've got to go. We've got to make Bronson well. So I turned the car around, and we went to church, and that was probably one of the best laps he'd ever had.
Slowly, after nearly half a year of total commitment and personal sacrifice, the Tates began to see a change in their little boy.
It was just incredible. It was just like this transformation before our eyes. I started to see this child that had just been hidden inside for so long.
I can remember distinctly when he first said, "I love you." It was pretty neat. It wasn't anything specific, you know. It was just, "I love you, Dad," you know, like that.
8 months from the day they started, they returned to Philadelphia to have Bronson reevaluated.
Good job.
they were just amazed at how well he had done in such a short amount of time. And by the end of the day, they told us that they felt like that Bronson was finished with the program. They felt like he was totally well. And I said, "Are you sure? I mean, he doesn't always do what I ask him to do." And then they would say, "Well, he's 3 years old." And I'm like, "Well, sometimes I'll tell him to do something and he won't do it." "Well, he's 3 years old." And I'm like, "You know, he's doing really well."
On February 22nd, 1995, Sherwood Bronson Tate joined an elite few who actually graduate.
Having him in my life like he is the greatest Mother's Day present I could have for the rest of my life. I mean, I don't need presents from now till the end of time because I have him. Our family was whole, and that was the most wonderful feeling.
Bronson will start preschool on schedule in the fall. Martha and Cliff Tate are now volunteering their time counseling other families with brain-disabled children. We'll be right back.
Next, we'll take you to New Orleans to witness a medical marvel. Twins born a record 95 days apart.
Friends will come up to me, "I know what you're going through," and I tell them, "No, you don't." Because you don't have a wife that has a baby and is still pregnant.
Welcome back. Our next story is about a brother and a sister born to the same mother and father in 2 different years with 2 different astrological signs. Now that in itself shouldn't make history, but it did, because Celeste and Timothy Keys are twins, born a record 95 days apart.
The twins' parents, Simone and Thomas Keys, were childhood sweethearts. When they got married, they wanted a family. First to come was a son, Thomas III. But when they decided on a second child, they found out Simone had a problem.
A heart specialist told us we couldn't have any kids. He said that if we wanted to have any more kids, we had to think about adopting.
Although she tried to avoid pregnancy, Simone was stunned but very happy when she found out she was pregnant with twins.
It was really shocking. We didn't know how heart was going to handle it.
Doctors determined the twins were fraternal. That meant they were in separate sacs with separate circulation. In essence, 2 individuals occupying the same womb. But then, 3.5 months before Simone was due to deliver, it looked like she was going to deliver.
She went straight into one of our intensive care rooms where we laid her on the table and tilted the table back so that hopefully gravity would pull the membranes back.
A little bit hard to breathe. It is, it's light.
We gave her medications to quiet the uterus.
But Simone went into labor. Doctors were expecting to deliver 2 dangerously premature babies.
And just like looking at ER on TV, folk running down the hall with the bed, and I'm behind the bed and I'm running down the hall. Once I walked in the room, I mean, as soon as I got in, Timothy had come out.
At only 1 pound 14 ounces, Timothy was immediately connected to a respirator and rushed to intensive care. Simone never saw her son. While Timothy was fighting for his life, another life was hovering in the balance inside Simone's womb. Doctors waited for the birth of the second twin, and waited, and waited, and waited.
We was like, well, is he gonna come? Because he was expecting for our uterus to continue to contract. It just stopped.
Normally, the second twin immediately follows the first.
The second baby was higher in the uterus and actually looked like she was trying to get as far away from the activity that was occurring as possible.
I certainly can't explain why that baby didn't come down. I don't think anybody can.
Now the doctors had to change their focus. This baby wasn't coming, so they stitched Simone's cervix shut and gave her antibiotics to prevent infection. And to try to keep the baby inside, they put Simone upside down again.
Every day we were taking as a victory, and at the end of every week, we all looked at each other and couldn't believe it.
Still 7 months pregnant, Simone had stabilized enough to be wheeled to intensive care to see her son for the first time.
I didn't see Timothy until he was a month old. So that was really, really hard because I am still pregnant. And
You were and you are.
and
Friends will come up to me, I know what you're going through, and I tell them, no, you don't. Because you don't have a wife that has a baby and is still pregnant.
January 18th, 1995, more than 3 months after the birth of Timothy, 9 months from conception, in the ultimate irony, his twin sister refused to be born. The doctors had to induce labor.
Deep breath, no, push. Good job. Girl.
Oh, it's been a long time, huh? You missed your brother.
Miraculously, Celeste Rebecca Keyes entered the world 95 days after her twin brother Timothy. In the process, they set a world record, 2 babies born 3 months apart, guaranteeing a lifetime of confusion.
I'd like to thank everyone who is part of tonight's program. We hope you've been touched by the people you've met and inspired by their remarkable stories. And before you go to bed tonight, give your miracle children an extra hug. That's what I'm going to do. Good night, everybody.